All right. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create the split step. And as always, we start off with the layout box. Make sure once you start out, oh, my camera there. Once you start out, that you do not move your paper. Remember to use the wood as your baseline if you are using wood. If not, the line that's there, just remember to use that as your baseline. Do not move the paper once you make the layout box, okay? So we're going to make the split step. This is the one that we're working on. It's actually quite simple. We're going to start by moving up just 1 inch. So the point of origin down here, move up about 1 inch, okay? And what we're doing is we're just creating this corner right there, okay? I'm going to open this up to the page with it, the larger page, okay? Okay, in the current book that I'm using, it's page 10. It might be different in your book. All right, so I just kind of went up to that line right there. Now what we're going to do is base the triangle, always on the baseline. Move that back. Move that one back. All right. So part of this line that I just created here is going to be erased, right? I only need about 1 inch, but I just brought it all the way back. All right. So now what I can do is I can measure that 1 inch, right? So 9 to 10 is, that would be a full inch. So right about there. All right. If this is done roughly like correctly, if you look here, this line, this original layout box line, if you do this correctly, this should actually almost be perfectly lined with that right there, which it is. Okay. So you can also use that method too. Just line up this line to there if you want to, or measure the 1 inch. All right. So I know everything beyond this I'm no longer going to need. So let's just erase that. Okay. Now that dot that we just made there, I'm going to bring this one up. Now, that line that I was talking about before, that line that we made, believe it or not, we're going to extend this one all the way down. Okay. This line right here, I'm going to erase. All right, so what I did was just to start over, point of origin, measured up 1 inch, measured over, which is should be roughly 1 inch. It should line up with this line here. Bring this line up, bring this line over. Remember, always using the triangle. The triangle's always sitting on the piece of wood. Never take the triangle off the piece of wood until we get to the very end where we have to make these angles here, right? We're never going to take the triangle off the piece of wood. Okay? Or if you're just using a baseline, if you're in high school just using a baseline, never take it off the baseline. Okay? Same idea, you're just using a different form of a straight line, a straight edge at the bottom here. Okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to bring this line back. So right here, and what I did was I just kind of created like this top portion of it right here. Okay? That's what I did. All right. Now, this line right here is actually going to be our center line. Now, this is going to be part of race because this is where the actual angle is going to be. The slope is going to be right here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to lower this line down right here. So we kind of create like that back piece, right? So we're kind of creating like the back piece here. Obviously, the slope isn't there yet. The back piece, okay? And then what we have to do is we have to bring this line over. So flip my triangle around. And again, if you've done this correctly, these should line right up. Okay. So if you watch some of my other videos, like the letter L, this is kind of like the letter L on its side. Okay. It's really done the same way. It's just the letter L just tipped on its side. So that's why everything should line up, just like it lines up in the letter L. It's pretty much the exact same thing. Now, some students then try to be like, hey, Mr. C, can I use the 60-degree angle to make the slope? I mean, if you really wanted to, you could. There's nothing that says you can't. But let's try to get this as centered as possible to make sure that we, have a center. The slope is actually in the center. So from this point right here, I'm going to measure over 3/4 of an inch, or roughly 3/4 of an inch. Okay. And then from this point over here, right, this should line up perfectly. Measure over here, roughly 3/4 of an inch. Hopefully yours looks better than mine. This is a little rough here. All right. So roughly 3/4 of an inch. Now, if you really want to turn it on its end and do the 60-degree angles, you're more than welcome to. You don't have to. You can just freehand this, but always use a straight edge. Whether you're using the 60-degree side, which again, I don't typically teach this because the 60-degree side doesn't work for some of the other ones. But this particular one, it actually will. Right. So if I bring this one back, right, and this is the only time that you take the base of the triangle off the baseline. Okay, so see how the triangle's sitting like this? That's normally not how we do it. We never do it like this. This particular one, you can get away with it. But again, it may not work on the other ones. It probably, actually, I know it won't work on the other ones, so don't try it unless your measurements are absolutely perfect. In that case, they will work. But again, just for this one, you can actually use the 60-degree side. This is like the only one you can get away with that. All right, so we've got a slope. It's sitting there. The problem is it doesn't quite look right. And why is that? Well, let's go over that real quick. We'll figure it out. We're gonna erase part of this. You'll see why in a minute. So we have a slope here, right? But we don't have the triangle portion that matches it up. So what do? We'll take this, we bring this down. Right? And take this and bring it back. And this is where it gets tricky, because if your line isn't perfect, this is why I tell you not to use the 60-degree side a lot of times, because when you bring this line down, if it comes down to this 1 inch here, if you've lined this up correctly or almost correctly, it should bring it right back and perfectly make it. So this would actually be a perfect 30, 60, 90 isometric triangle. So, 30 degrees, 60 degrees, which we use for the first time here, and then 90 degrees. This uses all three angles of the, oh boy, the lights just went out in the class. This uses all three angles of the triangle. Okay, this is probably one of the only ones that actually does that based on the measurements that I'm giving you. Okay, for our class, I only have you use the 30 and the 90. If you want to do the 60 in this case, you're more than welcome to. It actually looks really good if you do the 60, but again, it's not mandatory. The reason why I say you don't have to use the 60 is because if your measurements are off here, if it's a little bit longer, and I have some of these images floating around in the book. You may see these images, you may not, depending on the class and the curriculum. Let me show you where are some of the not so good. And let me see if I can find them for you. Okay, so like this one here, right? You can't always, the 60 won't always be perfect. Like this one, the measurement was off here, right? So in some cases, I'll let you know if this is acceptable. Usually in middle school, I'll accept this. In high school, I usually won't, because it needs to be perfect. In high school, middle school, I'm a little more flexible. But sometimes when you line up the triangle, right, the angles, like they're not always going to be like perfectly 60, right? So if I rest this one on the baseline, for instance, like let me straighten this up so you can see it. You notice that that's not perfectly 60. Okay, it just happens to be the way that this one was drawn, only because this is too long here, it's too long there, right? And the lines, what happens is when you bring these lines back, these 30-degree lines, right? When you bring these lines back, these 30s, they actually line up really well here, right? But if you did it with the 60, they probably wouldn't line up. Okay, so that's why I'm not too critical on the 30, 60, 90 portion of it, and I say you can freehand some of your slopes. Again, it's class dependent. Some classes, high school, were a little more rigorous with the standards. Middle school, I'm a little more flexible with that. So again, just ask me in person what I want for you for your class. But for the most part, this is the split step. That's how it's done. All right. If you have any questions, just let me know.